Fratelli Tutti, Pope Francis's encyclical published in October of 2020, translates as brothers and sisters all, and uses the see, judge, act method to examine the need for peace and dialogue in our conflicts today. In the Acts section, Pope Francis examines 3 ways we can take action. First, building a culture of peace. Second, sharing of goods. And third, inclusion of local cultures in the global world. Let's look more at these. First, we need to build a culture of peace. The Pope describes how our world is growing more and more violent, and it could be the end of all of us. We need to remember that we are common people who share a common creator, and we need to start acting like it. Francis is calling us to turn away from violence at the personal level and the global level in our words and deeds, especially for our political leaders. For them, he calls for a better kind of politics, where they act truly at the service of the common good and are truly open to all people. He explains that it's violent not to care for the commons, and it's violent to let any person, citizen or non-citizen, be denied what they need to live in dignity. This is a particularly difficult ask for the United States, where politicians make personal attacks daily, and an isolationist attitude currently rules. Be sure to read paragraph 45, which could be a direct message to Donald Trump, the 45th President of the United States. Quote, "This has now given free rein to ideologies. Things that until a few years ago could not be said by anyone without risking the loss of universal respect can now be said with impunity and in the crudest of terms, even by some political figures." And it ends with the sentence, "These closed circuits facilitate the spread of fake news and false information, fomenting prejudice and hate." So how do we build a culture of peace? It starts with encounter, and it continues with dialogue. For Pope Francis, building a healthier society starts with an encounter with our neighbors, with people who are different from us, people who are struggling. It involves listening to our struggling brothers and sisters at every level, and includes marginalized groups, in particular minorities and women, and reimagining the structures that can cause people to suffer, in particular the structures of multilateral institutions like the UN and international finance institutions, in order to, quote, "give them some real teeth," Francis says. And also on a national and international level, it means rejecting war, nuclear weapons, and the death penalty, 3 difficult asks for the United States, and listening to poor and vulnerable nations, having them at the decision-making table based on what's best for all people, not just the powerful. I want to take a moment to talk about turning away from violence and rejecting war, nuclear weapons, and the death penalty. First, to turn away from violence, we must turn towards something. The obvious answer is non-violence. It's a skill set that can be learned and shared. Let's look at the Pope's World Day of Peace messages since 2014. And I've gone ahead and I've circled the terms that show up in Fratelli Tutti. Starting at the bottom in 2014, you see the term fraternity, brothers and sisters, indifference, style of politics, good politics, and dialogue. The one term that does not appear in Fratelli Tutti is in the purple box, nonviolence. Nonviolence, a style of politics for peace, was the title of the World Day of Peace message by Pope Francis in 2017. And here are 3 quotes from that message. To be a true follower of Jesus today also includes embracing his teaching on nonviolence. And the Pope wrote, "I pledge the assistance of the Church in every effort to build peace through active and creative nonviolence." And he offers that Jesus himself offers a manual for this strategy of peacemaking in the Sermon on the Mount. And then he concludes this 2017 message speaking directly to politicians, offering the Beatitudes as the manual for them to follow. These key points don't appear in Fratelli Tutti. What does appear in the encyclical are some lines about the just war theory And in paragraph 258, Francis writes, "It's very difficult nowadays to invoke the rational criteria elaborated in earlier centuries to speak of the possibility of a just war." And he repeats, "Never again war." Now, I also want to point out the footnote, which is number 242, where he speaks about St. Augustine, who is our creator of this just war theory, but the Pope writes, "We no longer uphold it in our day." And he explains that even from the beginning, the higher glory was to stay war itself with a word. So this is where we turn today. The Pope also uses Fratelli, Tutti to settle the debates about the possession and the use and the possession of nuclear weapons and the use of the death penalty. So now this is settled. Even the possession of nuclear weapons is immoral, and the use of the death penalty is inadmissible. So the debate about the just war theory is now well underway, and I encourage you to personally learn about nonviolence, knowing that turning away from violence means turning towards the opposite, nonviolence. And on the left is a picture of the cover of a new book published by Pax Christi International's project called the Catholic Nonviolence Initiative, called Advancing Nonviolence and Just Peace in the Church and the World. And then also for learning personal skills to practice nonviolence. I recommend the workbook called Engage, produced by Pace Bene's project called Campaign Nonviolence. It's great for personal study and small group study. Now back to the list on how to create a culture of peace, according to Fratelli Tutti. How can we educate political leaders and all citizens about turning away from violence, a better kind of politics? How can we teach what is the common good and how to serve it? How can we demonstrate openness to all people? How can we enter into more encounter, more dialogue, more listening, more including women and minorities at decision-making tables? I think the Synod on the Amazon was a great example of that, and we at the local level, national and international level can replicate it and bring it back to the Vatican as well. Also, reimagining structures, the UN, World Bank, IMF, to give them real teeth. These are issues that could be raised, with our members of Congress and our administration. Rejecting war, nuclear weapons, death penalty. This really is still at the education level for U.S. Catholics, and anything that we can do to help at our parish level, in our Catholic schools, our seminaries, all of that will help move U.S. Catholics further along to build a culture of peace. The second part of the Pope's vision for society in Fratelli Tutti is that goods are meant to be shared. For Francis, a heart open to the world, full of love for all brothers and sisters and a better politics, would recognize the universal destination of goods. This vision is based on the Catholic social teaching principle that the earth and all it produces is intended for every person. Private ownership is acceptable, but there is also a responsibility to ensure that all have enough to live in dignity. If we have more than we need, then there's a social obligation to ensure that others don't go without. Again, this is getting rid of an individualistic mindset and replacing it with a love for neighbor and care for community. This means not allowing for extreme income inequality and the extremely wealthy to get out of paying their fair share in taxes. It also means it's not acceptable that, for example, some nations waste tons of food while other nations have famines. The third part of the Pope's vision is finding a place for local culture in the global world. Pope Francis is concerned about people in marginalized countries and social groups who feel that they must reject or give up their local culture and community. He's also concerned about what more connected global society in general is doing for local cultures. When people on the margins feel they have to abandon their language and their customs and their communities to succeed in a globalized world, that is a loss for all of humanity. For Francis, the ideal situation would be that people can thrive in the places that they're born. But when that isn't the case, it means that we all need to be intentional about welcoming people, about having real friendships with people who are different from us. And that means that inclusion and diversity are necessary for not only at the personal level, but on the national and the global level to solve universal problems and heal the world of all of the darkness. To sum it up, Pope Francis offers a three-part vision for action in Fratelli Tutti: building a culture of peace, where we have the open sharing of goods, and we include local cultures in our global world. Thank you.